"This woman tried to kill me, Your Honor." Officer Martinez's voice thundered across the courtroom as he jabbed a finger toward Dr. Keisha Williams, seated silently at the defense table. "She pulled a weapon, screamed threats at me, and tried to run me over with her stolen vehicle." Keisha didn't flinch. No tears, no outrage. Just calm, unblinking patience. Martinez stood tall in his polished uniform. 15 years on the force. Medals shining, jaw set with rehearsed righteousness. "The defendant is a manipulator who thinks she's above the law," he continued, his tone dripping with false conviction. But what the courtroom didn't know was this: every word leaving his mouth was a lie, and the woman he was lying about, she had a badge that outranked his, a federal one. The courtroom was packed so tightly that even the air felt tense. Every seat was filled, every whisper carried weight, and every eye was fixed on the uniformed officer standing proudly in the witness box. Officer Martinez, 15 years in uniform. Medals polished, boots shined, jaw set like carved stone. He didn't just look confident, he looked untouchable. And across from him, seated quietly at the defense table, was Dr. Keisha Williams. Her posture was steady, her expression calm, her suit pressed, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Not a tremor, not a tear, not a single sign of fear, but the way the courtroom looked at her, as if they already believed she was guilty. Martinez raised his voice so everyone could hear it clearly, especially the jury. "Your Honor," he declared, pointing directly at Keisha, "this woman is dangerous. She threatened me. She tried to run me down. She said she had people who could make me disappear." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. A few jurors shifted uncomfortably. Even the judge's eyebrows tightened, but Keisha didn't flinch. She simply clicked her pen once and wrote something down. Martinez continued, his voice swelling with conviction. "She called me every name you can imagine. She acted like the law didn't apply to her. She tried to intimidate me." "Me, Your Honor." "A sworn police officer just doing my job." A woman in the gallery shook her head. Someone whispered, "What a disgrace." Martinez looked at the jury, each face, one by one. This was not the first time he told a story like this, and he knew exactly how to tell it. The prosecutor smiled. The judge took notes. The gallery nodded along. Everyone in this room thought they already knew the truth, everyone, except the woman being accused. Keisha lifted her gaze slowly. Her eyes met Martinez's. No anger, no fear, just patience, because she knew something that no one else in this courtroom knew. She knew that Officer Martinez was lying, not mistaken. Not confused, lying under oath, and what Martinez didn't. Doubting what no one in this room yet understood was that Dr. Keisha Williams was not the woman he thought she was. She was not just some civilian he could intimidate. She was not someone whose voice would be ignored. She was not a victim. She was a federal inspector, and she had come here prepared, but the courtroom wasn't ready, not yet, because her reveal would not just defend her name. It would destroy his entire career. What happens when a man who thinks he holds power lies in front of someone who holds more? The truth, when it comes, won't just set her free. It will bury him. The prosecutor adjusted his glasses and stepped forward, pacing slowly in front of the jury as if guiding them through a familiar and trusted narrative. "Officer Martinez," he began, voice calm, even friendly, "please explain to the court in your own words what happened that night." Martinez nodded, drawing in a deep breath, the kind of breath people take when they're about to perform. "I was conducting traffic patrol near Maple Avenue," he said, speaking with practiced precision. "It was a quiet evening, nothing out of the ordinary. Then I spotted the defendant's vehicle, speeding through a residential area. A woman in the gallery frowned, shaking her head slightly, already forming an opinion. Martinez continued, his hand resting lightly on his duty belt, a stance that suggested authority, strength, familiarity with danger. "So I initiated a stop. Standard procedure." He paused, looked directly at the jurors. Let the silence work for him. "But the moment I approached her window," he said, raising his voice slightly, "she became hostile. She refused to show her license. She started yelling. She kept reaching down into her glove compartment, like she was trying to hide something or grab something." More murmurs from the gallery. Keisha sat still. No reaction. Just listening, documenting every lie. Martinez glanced toward her. He wasn't worried. Not even a little, because he had done this before. Aggressive behavior during a traffic stop presents danger, he continued solemnly. I had to defend myself. I had to control the situation. I believed my life was in danger. He let the words hang, soaking into the air like heavy smoke. Danger, threat, fear, words that sway juries. The prosecutor nodded approvingly. Did she say anything threatening to you? Oh yes, Martinez said, eyes narrowing, expression stiffening with righteous indignation. She said I'd regret pulling her over. Said she had people in high positions. People who could ruin me. The courtroom buzzed. Someone whispered, yeah, I've seen people like that. But the judge? He didn't react. He simply wrote more notes. Kesha breathed slowly, her pulse steady, her pen gliding smoothly across her. Paired because she had heard all of this before, not from Martinez, but from dozens of others like him. Men who thought their badge was armor against consequences. Men who believed the system was on their side, always, but there was something different about today, because, unlike every person Martinez had lied about before, Kesha had evidence, concrete, documented, time-stamped evidence he didn't know existed. Evidence that would rewrite the narrative in front of everyone. And he had just walked himself right to the edge of the cliff with his own testimony, one lie at a time. But what happens when a story built on lies meets proof carved in truth? The courtroom was about to find out, in a way none of them were prepared for. When Martinez finished his testimony, he stepped down with the confidence of a man who believed the case was already won. He sat tall in his chair, arms crossed, jaw lifted, a picture of victory. And why wouldn't he be confident? The gallery seemed to be on his side. The prosecutor looked satisfied. The judge appeared convinced. Everyone thought this was just another case, another officer's word against another defendant's denial. But what no one noticed, not yet, was the stillness in Kesha's movements. Stillness not of fear, but of strategy. Her attorney, Sarah Lane, looked young, too young in the eyes of many watching. Her voice trembled slightly as she stood. She was nervous. The gallery sensed it, whispered about it. The prosecutor smirked. Sarah cleared her throat, flipped through her papers, and finally said, "The defense calls Dr. Kesha Williams to the stand." The courtroom shifted. Heads turned, whispers faded. Kesha rose slowly, smoothing her blazer, gathering her notes, not frantically, not with emotion, but with the calm efficiency of someone used to being watched. She stepped up to the witness stand, but it wasn't her walk that changed the room. It was the way she sat down, straight-backed, composed, unmoved by the weight of the moment, like she belonged there. The bailiff approached. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" Kesha looked him directly in the eyes. "I do." Even her voice carried a steadiness that made the judge pause. Sarah Lane swallowed hard. "Dr. Williams," she began softly, "can you tell the court in your own words what happened on the night of March 15th? Kesha folded her hands on the stand. Not defensive, not pleading, just ready. "Officer Martinez's account," she said clearly, "is inaccurate." The gallery stirred, a ripple of disbelief. She didn't waver. "I was not speeding. I handed him my license and registration immediately." My hands remained visible on the steering wheel the entire time. She spoke slowly, clearly, deliberately, no anger. "Just fact." Martinez stiffened in his chair. Kesha continued. "And at no point did I threaten him. The statements he claims I made were never spoken. They are fabrications. Fabrications. A bold word." Sarah watched her carefully, nervous. The prosecutor sat up straighter. The judge lowered his pen. Kesha leaned forward just slightly, enough to command attention. "I know this," she said, "because I documented the entire encounter. And because I have been trained to do so." The room fell silent. Martinez blinked. The prosecutor frowned. Sarah looked confused, and the judge finally looked curious, because that was not the answer of an ordinary defendant. That was the answer of someone who knew exactly what she was doing, someone who had prepared, someone with experience, someone with authority. But no one was prepared for what Kesha was about to reveal next, a truth that would turn the entire case upside down. The quiet in the courtroom wasn't the usual kind. It was heavy, like everyone had collectively stopped breathing. Kesha sat poised on the witness stand, her hands calmly folded, her gaze steady. The judge's eyes narrowed, not with suspicion but with interest. "Dr. Williams," Sarah asked, steadying her voice, "you mentioned that you documented the encounter. What do you mean by that?" Kesha nodded once as if she had expected the question. "I was returning from a professional oversight meeting," she said, projecting her words so the jury could hear every syllable. "And I followed standard safety procedures during a traffic stop. That includes keeping my hands visible, speaking calmly, and, when necessary, recording my interactions." A murmur traveled through the gallery. "Recording?" Martinez's jaw clenched. The prosecutor interjected quickly, his tone sharp and dismissive. "Your Honor, I must object. The defendant is implying some sort of law enforcement familiarity. Unless she is qualified to make such claims." The judge raised a hand. "Dr. Williams," he said, leaning slightly forward, "could you clarify your professional background for the court?" This was the moment. Keisha didn't smile. She didn't grandstand. She didn't rush. She simply stated the truth. "I hold a doctorate in criminal justice administration. I've conducted oversight evaluations for public safety agencies for the past 11 years. I have participated in multiple compliance reviews involving police departments and civil rights procedure." Silence. The jury sat still. The judge blinked. The prosecutor's confidence faltered for the first time. Kesha's voice remained calm, steady, unshaken. "So yes," she continued, "I am trained to document official encounters. And yes, I am familiar with law enforcement protocol." A slow, quiet shift passed through the room. People were no longer looking at her as a defendant. They were looking at her as someone who knew the field better than the officer accusing her. Martinez stared forward. Unblinking, muscles in his neck tightening, Kesha wasn't finished. "The statements Officer Martinez claims I made, the tone he describes, the aggression he alleges, none of those occurred. I remained seated. I complied fully. I spoke respectfully. There were no threats, no raised voice, no sudden movements." Her voice grew quieter but somehow stronger. "And if the court permits, I can provide documentation supporting that." Sarah Lane. Her attorney looked stunned but relieved. This was no longer a case of her word against his. This was now a case of training versus performance evidence. First storytelling truth versus the tale. He rehearsed and the gallery knew. Martinez shifted uncomfortably because his story, once solid, now felt like sand. But Kesha had not yet revealed the proof, and when she did, it wouldn't just undermine his story, it would unravel something much larger. The judge's expression changed. Subtly, yes, but noticeably. He was no longer simply presiding. He was listening. "Dr. Williams," he said, voice even, "you stated that you documented the encounter. Does this documentation include audio or video?" Across the room, Officer Martinez's entire body tensed. Kesha didn't answer right away. She let the silence settle, allowed the room to feel the weight of the question. Then she spoke. "Yes, Your Honor, it does." A reaction rippled through the gallery, not loud but unmistakably alive. A shifting of bodies, a tightening of focus, a collective leaning forward. The prosecutor rose quickly. "Your Honor, we have not been given any such evidence." Sarah Lane, once nervous and unsure, lifted her chin for the first time that day. "That's because the prosecution insisted on rushing this case to trial," she said, voice gaining strength. "We have complied with all legal requirements. The documentation will be submitted as evidence during the defense's presentation." The prosecutor opened his mouth to argue, but the judge stopped him with a single raised hand. "Sit down." "Counselor." It was not a request. Martinez swallowed hard. Kesha continued, her tone still calm, still controlled. "The officer stated I refused to provide identification. That is untrue. The officer claimed I reached repeatedly into my glove compartment. That is untrue. The officer stated I made verbal threats. That is untrue." Each untrue landed like a hammer, measured, firm, undeniable. She turned her head slowly and looked directly at Martinez, but I understand why he described it that way. You could feel the room tense, not physically but emotionally, as though everyone instinctively braced for what was coming. He did not expect me to have the knowledge or experience to question his report. He did not expect me to have documentation. He did not expect the truth to be provable. Martinez's face flushed red. He leaned forward, unable to stop himself. "You're twisting this. You were—" The judge snapped, "Officer Martinez, you do not have the floor." Martinez froze. But the damage was done. The jury had seen him lose composure. Kesha, meanwhile, didn't so much as blink. This was not the reaction of someone trying to be believed. This was the reaction of someone who knew the truth would speak for itself. Sarah Lane stepped forward, her nerves replaced by a quiet confidence. "Your Honor, the defense will have a witness to introduce next, and this witness's testimony directly contradicts Officer Martinez's sworn statements." The gallery buzzed again. Martinez's jaw tightened. He looked less like a decorated officer, and more like a man who suddenly realized the ground beneath him was starting to crack. But the witness waiting to take the stand wasn't just any bystander. He was someone who saw everything and recorded more than anyone expected. When the judge returned his attention to the defense table, the room seemed to hold its breath. "Ms. Lane," he said, "you may call your next witness." Sarah Lane stood, confidence now replacing the shakiness she had earlier. "The defense calls Mr. David Park to the stand." A man in his mid-50s rose slowly from the back of the courtroom, small-framed, quiet, the type of person people overlook in everyday life. But Martinez saw him, and the officer's eyes widened. He knew that face. He had seen him before. Mr. Park was sworn in and took his seat. He adjusted his glasses carefully, folding his hands in his lap. "Mr. Park," Sarah began, "please state your occupation for the record." "I own Park's Market on Maple Avenue," he answered softly. "My store is located directly across the street from where the traffic stop took place." Already, the jury leaned forward. The prosecutor's posture stiffened. Sarah continued, "Do you have security cameras on your property?" "Yes," Park nodded. 4 high-definition outdoor cameras. They record continuously, with audio. A shift, a heavy shift. Every head turned toward Martinez, his jaw locked. His breathing changed, because suddenly this wasn't just her word versus his, this was footage. Sarah stepped closer to the witness stand. "Mr. Park, did you review your security footage from the evening of March 15th? "Yes," he said. "After hearing Officer Martinez's statements on the news, I checked the recording." "And what did you see?" Park looked directly at the jury, which made his words land even harder. "I saw Dr. Williams pull over immediately. I saw her turn off the engine. I saw her place both hands on the steering wheel. They stayed there the entire time, unless she was handing him her documents, which she did calmly. No dramatics, no embellishment, just truth." Sarah nodded slowly. "Did you observe any aggressive or threatening behavior from Dr. Williams?" "No," Park said. She did not raise her voice. She did not gesture. She did not resist. "She followed every instruction," the gallery murmured, louder now. The foundation of Martinez's story was cracking. Sarah took one more step. "And the officer's behavior?" Park swallowed but did not hesitate. He became aggressive after looking at her identification. He leaned in close to her window. His tone changed. He questioned how she could afford to live where she lives. He seemed angry. The prosecutor jumped to his feet. "Your Honor, this is speculation." "No," the judge said, voice firm. "This is observation." Martinez's shoulders sank. Everyone could feel it now. The tide was turning, not gently, not slowly. Suddenly, Mr. Park wasn't just a witness. He was the witness Martinez never expected to exist, and his testimony wasn't damaging. It was devastating. But what Mr. Park revealed next, something he had not yet said out loud, would shift the courtroom from tense to explosive. Mr. Park adjusted his glasses again, hands steady, voice calm. He was not a man who exaggerated. He was a man who observed. Sarah Lane took a slow breath. Her earlier nervousness was gone. She now held the room. "Mr. Park," she asked clearly, "you mentioned your camera's record audio as well. Did they capture what was said during the traffic stop?" A hush rippled across the courtroom. Not a dramatic gasp, but something quieter, heavier. Expectation. "Yes," Mr. Park replied. The recording captured everything. Officer Martinez shifted in his seat. His jaw worked side to side. A muscle in his temple pulsed. Kesha didn't look at him. She didn't need to. She already knew the truth. Sarah continued. Your Honor, the defense moves to enter Exhibit A into evidence, the security footage from Park's Market. Recorded the night of the traffic stop. The prosecutor stood quickly, voice sharp. Your Honor, the chain of custody is unclear. The judge shut him down with a raised hand. Mr. Park. Is this recording from your own security system? Yes. Has it been altered in any way? No. Has it been in your possession until today? Yes, the judge nodded. Exhibit A is admitted. Play the footage. A court clerk wheeled out a monitor. Lights dimmed slightly. The room leaned forward. The video began, clear, steady, undeniable. Kesha's vehicle pulled over smoothly. No sudden movements, no delay, no attempt to flee. Officer Martinez approached the window. His posture was relaxed at first. Then, right on cue, the moment he looked at her license. His stance changed, his shoulders squared, his voice sharpened. His tone shifted, and the words he spoke, now echoing through speakers filling the courtroom, erased every shred of his earlier testimony. People like you don't belong in that neighborhood. You must think you're something special. A sharp inhale swept through the gallery. Not imagination, not exaggeration, reality. Martinez did not stop there. You think your money means you can talk down to officers? Don't test me. I can make your life very, very difficult. The prosecutor closed his eyes. The judge's expression hardened, and the jury, once uncertain, now stared at Martinez with a collective disbelief that bordered on disgust. Meanwhile, Kesha in the video? Calm, soft-spoken, composed. Officer, I'm complying. I'm not resisting. I'm simply asking what I was stopped for. No raised voice. No aggression. No threat. It was the opposite of everything Martinez had sworn under oath. The video paused, and the silence that followed was not empty. It was condemnation. Martinez's chest rose and fell too quickly. He looked smaller now, not physically, but in presence, in confidence, in authority. His story had collapsed, and everyone knew it. But the courtroom had only seen what happened. Next they would learn who they were actually dealing with. And that was the part that would break the room open completely. The monitor went dark, but the silence that followed the footage was louder than any sound. No one in the courtroom moved. No one coughed. No one even shifted in their seat. The truth, real, visible, undeniable truth, had just been played right in front of them. The judge folded his hands slowly. Deliberately, Officer Martinez, he said, turning his gaze toward the man who now looked far smaller in uniform than he had an hour ago. Do you have any explanation for why your sworn testimony differs so substantially from this recording? Martinez's mouth opened, but nothing came out. For the first time since he entered that courtroom, he had no script. His attorney leaned toward him, whispering frantically. Martinez shook his head, not in refusal, but in confusion. He had never been cornered like this before. He had always walked away clean, not today. The prosecutor, looking flushed and shaken, tried to regain footing. Your Honor, he said cautiously, perhaps the footage lacks context. Perhaps the judge did not look convinced, and more importantly, the jury was no longer listening to him. Their attention was on Kesha, a woman who had sat still, calm, and quiet. While the truth slowly unfolded around her, Sarah Lane rose again, but this time, though she didn't look anxious, she looked purposeful. Your Honor, she said, the defense has another witness whose testimony not only corroborates what you just saw, but provides insight into Officer Martinez's pattern of behavior. A ripple of reaction spread through the gallery. A pattern? Martinez's shoulders stiffened. No, absolutely not, the prosecutor began. But Kesha was already watching Martinez, not with anger, not with triumph, just certainty. Sarah continued. The defense calls Mrs. Eleanor Washington to the stand. An older woman stood from the second row, grey curls, church dress, hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from memory. Martinez closed his eyes. He remembered her. The courtroom felt the shift, again. The bailiff swore her in, and Mrs. Washington sat down, spine straight. Dignity intact, Mrs. Washington, Sarah said gently. Could you describe your encounter with Officer Martinez last September? In your own words? The older woman took a slow breath. He stopped me outside my church, she began. Said I didn't belong in the neighborhood I was driving through. Said my attitude was a problem. Her lip trembled, but she did not break. "I never raised my voice," she continued. "I never argued. But he wrote in his report that I threatened him. He lied, and when I tried to fight it in court..." Her eyes glistened. No one believed me. The jurors shifted, discomfort, guilt, recognition mixing together, because now they heard the pattern, and they recognized it. Kesha's voice, calm, steady, cut through the silence. "You believed him," she said softly, "because of who he was. And because of who you were," Mrs. Washington nodded. "Yes, baby, that's exactly what happened." Martinez stared down at the table, because the room was no longer questioning the incident. The room was questioning him, his career, his credibility, his character. And this was just the beginning of what Kesha was about to reveal, because the courtroom still didn't know who she really was. And when they found out, every power dynamic in the room would flip instantly. The courtroom felt different now, not just tense, uneasy, like everyone could sense something larger unfolding, even if they didn't yet understand what it was. Martinez sat frozen. His confidence was gone, stripped away piece by piece. And now all that remained was the quiet panic in his eyes. Mrs. Washington finished her testimony and stepped down, holding her dignity like a shield. The gallery watched her, not as a witness, but as someone they now heard for the first time. Sarah Lane stood again, but before she could speak, the judge addressed Kesha directly. "Dr. Williams," he said slowly, "your testimony, your language, your documentation suggests a degree of training beyond that of an ordinary civilian. Would you like to clarify your professional role for the court?" The room stilled. Sarah looked at Kesha. Kesha nodded. Then she rose from the witness stand, and not hurriedly, not theatrically, but with deliberate, quiet authority. She returned to the defense table and picked up her briefcase. A simple, dark leather case that had sat unnoticed all morning. She opened it. The sound of the metal clasp clicking seemed to echo from inside. She withdrew a black leather wallet, not the kind for money, but one meant to hold credentials, federal credentials. She walked back to the stand, placed the wallet on the podium, and opened it so that the judge, and only the judge, West could see. The judge leaned forward. Then he blinked once, twice. He sat back in his chair, not shocked exactly, but corrected, like someone who has just realized they've been looking at a situation upside down. He cleared his throat. "Please state your full professional title for the record." Kesha looked up, not at Martinez, not at the prosecutor, not at the jury. She looked straight ahead. "I am Senior Inspector Dr. Kesha L. Williams, Civil Rights Division, United States Department of Justice." The words didn't just enter the room, they hit it hard. A ripple shot through the gallery. Chairs shifted. Hands covered mouths. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Martinez stared ahead, eyes wide. Face pale, lips parted, because now and he finally understood. He hadn't lied. About a random woman, he hadn't sworn false testimony against someone powerless. He had committed perjury against a federal inspector sent to investigate police misconduct and civil rights violations. He had just lit the fuse on his own destruction. "Kesha," continued, calm as a winter lake, "I was in your town conducting an active federal audit of use of force reports, complaint handling, and officer accountability procedures. My interaction with officer not incidental. It was part of a larger investigation already underway." The prosecutor sank into his chair. Martinez looked sick. The judge nodded, slowly, now in full understanding. This was no longer a local case. This was a federal investigation, unfolding in real time. And Officer Martinez had just given his confession, not under pressure, not by mistake, but on record, under oath, in open court. He just didn't realize the consequences. Yet, the shift in the room was instant and irreversible. What had begun as a simple traffic case now sat under the heavy shadow of federal authority. And everyone felt it. The gallery, once buzzing with judgment and whispers, had gone silent. The prosecutor sat rigid, eyes lowered, his case collapsing not just at the seams but from the foundation. And Officer Martinez, he did not look like a man anymore. He looked like a verdict waiting to happen. The judge took a long breath, as though he needed to reset the entire proceedings in his mind. "Dr. Williams," he said carefully, Are you telling this court that you were acting in an official capacity at the time of the traffic stop? Kesha nodded once. Yes, Your Honor, I was operating under federal authorization. That single sentence sealed everything, because lying to the court about a civilian is bad. But lying about a federal inspector during an active civil rights investigation, that was something else entirely. Martinez's attorney leaned toward him urgently, whispering intensely, but Martinez's eyes were fixed ahead, unfocused, as if he could no longer hear anything. He finally understood the magnitude of what he had done. Kesha continued, her tone still steady, still professional. I did not reveal my identity during the stop because the investigation was ongoing. It required authentic officer behavior, not rehearsed compliance. There it was. She hadn't just witnessed his misconduct, she had documented it while he thought no one was watching. Sarah Lane, no longer the unsure public defender, stepped forward with renewed strength. Your Honor, in light of Dr. Williams's verified federal status and the evidence presented, including video, witness testimony, and the officer's contradictory statements, we move to have all charges against Dr. Williams dismissed. The prosecutor didn't object. He couldn't. The judge didn't. Deliberate. He didn't need to. This court finds the defendant not guilty on all charges. The sound of the judge's gavel cracking through the courtroom was sharp and final, like a bone breaking. But everything that followed was worse. Kesha turned to Martinez, not with anger, not with triumph, but with the quiet, devastating certainty of someone who knows the truth does not need to raise its voice. Officer Martinez, she said, her voice low, controlled, almost gentle. I told the truth under oath. You did not. Martinez swallowed hard. A tremor ran through his hands because now the case wasn't about whether he had lied. It was about what would happen because he lied. The judge spoke, his tone formal but heavy. Officer Martinez, given the evidence presented and Dr. Williams's federal authority, this court must notify the United States Attorney's Office for review of potential perjury and civil rights violation charges. The gallery gasped, some soundless, some aloud. This was no longer speculation, no longer threat, no longer rumor. This was real. Martinez's fate was no longer in his own hands. But the courtroom had only just begun to feel the consequences, because once federal investigators moved in, Martinez would not be the only one facing judgment. The judge's words hung in the air like a bell that had just been struck, deep, echoing, impossible to ignore. Martinez stared down at the table, his hands no longer steady. The courtroom no longer looked at him as an officer, or an authority, or even a man in control of his circumstances. They looked at him as a man who had just realized he had been standing on a trapdoor, and someone finally pulled the lever. A federal inspector. A documented recording. A pattern of prior complaints. And now, perjury in open court. It was no longer a question of if, it was a question of how far and how deep this was going to go. The prosecutor stood, but not tall. Not anymore. Your Honor. The state requests a brief recess to confer regarding the implications of— No, Judge Harrison said, voice firm. This situation does not require a recess. It requires transparency, immediately. He motioned to court security. Please escort Officer Martinez to the side holding room pending federal review. Martinez's eyes widened. His mouth opened. And for the first time, the man who had spoken with booming confidence now whispered, I didn't mean for this to happen. Kesha didn't look away. Officer, she said quietly, you meant every word you said under oath. You just didn't think the truth would be heard. The bailiffs approached. Martinez flinched away. I have a family, he said, voice cracking. I have a career. The judge cut him off. You had a career, and you chose to throw it away the moment you used your authority to harm those you were sworn to protect. The bailiffs placed a hand on his arm. This time, Martinez didn't resist. He simply collapsed inward, shoulders dropping, expression hollow, as if his entire identity had been built on something that was never real. He walked out of the courtroom not proudly, not confidently, but as a man finally seeing himself clearly for the first time. And what he saw was not who he believed himself to be. The gallery remained silent. Not a whisper. Not a cough. just the slow realization settling in. This wasn't just about one officer. If there were complaints ignored, if there were reports buried, if there were families silenced, then there were others involved, supervisors, commanders, administrators. Kesha gathered her files slowly, precise as ever. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply prepared for the next step, because her work had never been about winning her own case. It had always been about what came after: federal review, department audit, structural reform, and that was just beginning. But the real reckoning would not happen in that courtroom. It would happen in the months that followed, when the entire department learned who Dr. Kesha Williams truly was, and what accountability really looks like. 6 months passed. The small-town courthouse that once saw Officer Martinez as a decorated veteran now displayed a federal consent decree posted on its doors, a public reminder that the Department of Justice was now watching. The investigation expanded quickly. Files that had been buried were reopened. Complaints once dismissed as misunderstandings were validated. Officers who had remained silent out of fear came forward with statements they had never dared to speak aloud before. The police department did not collapse overnight. It was unraveled. Not by rumors, not by outrage, by evidence. Body cameras became mandatory and tamper-proof. Traffic stops were reviewed by independent oversight boards. Citizens who had been wrongfully charged had those records cleared, their dignity restored. And Officer Martinez, he now sat in a federal correctional facility, not as an officer, not as an authority, but as a man who had once believed the badge meant he would never be held accountable. His name became a quiet warning to others who thought the same. But the story did not end with him. It continued with Dr. Kesha Williams. She returned to her work, not as a hero seeking praise, but as a professional committed to the principles she had always stood for: truth, accountability, and the protection of civil rights. One morning, she spoke at a civil rights conference, rooms filled with lawyers, advocates, and community leaders, not with anger, not with bitterness, with purpose. When people in power misuse their authority, she said, it is not simply an abuse of policy, it is an attempt to reshape reality itself, to make lies seem like truth and truth seem like weakness. But truth, she paused, her voice steady and resonant, does not fear the light. In the front row, her daughter Maya watched, the same daughter who had opened the office door months earlier and asked if her mother was afraid. Maya didn't ask that anymore. She knew the answer. Kesha had faced the very system many fear cannot be challenged. And she hadn't broken. She had revealed it piece by piece, quietly, patiently, completely, not through shouting, not through anger, through evidence. And the truth, once seen, could no longer be unseen. If stories like this matter to you, stories of truth, accountability, and voices that refuse to be silenced, make sure to follow, comment, and share your thoughts. Because stories like this don't just inform us, they protect us. They remind us that justice is not passive. It must be seen, spoken and defended. And sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one who refuses to be silent.